Hello, and welcome back to the Words in the World tutorial series on PsychoPy3. In the previous experiment, we succeeded in getting our experiment online, and we ran it, and we got some data. So now we want to start customizing our experiment a little bit. So in this video, we're going to add a component that will detect correct or incorrect answers, and we're going to add a custom code component. After we've done that, well, we'll probably make a mistake. I'm no expert in coding, so I regularly make a lot of errors. And so what we'll do is hopefully make an error, and if I don't make one, then I will make one intentionally, and then we're going to find out how we can kind of troubleshoot, identify the error, and figure out how to fix it, because it's not always immediately clear. So yeah, we'll get into it. All right. All right, here we are. So now we're back in our lexical decision task. So what we've got is our brief instructions, we've got our fixation point, and we've got our trial with a stimulus display and our response. And all of this is now available online. All right. So now we want to add a way of detecting correct answers. So if you remember in our keyboard component, we had this way we had this option to store correct. So this actually is defaulted to blank. So when I click this box, store correct, now I have this option of including a correct answer. Now one of the issues is that for every trial, there is going to be a different correct answer. So we're going to have to add a column into our conditions file that specifies what the correct answer is. So let's have a look here. I'm just going to add it in here. It could be anywhere. Let's just call it correct key. So, well, the first 5 words here are all real words, and as I've specified in the instructions, when it's a real word, you should be pressing A, and when it's a non-word, you should be pressing L. So there we go. Now I've just added this additional column. So what happens is when the experiment is running through my conditions file, let's say it goes down and selects row number 7, it's going to say, okay, well, this is the stimuli, and it's going to specify that this is the correct key that I'm looking for. All right, so let's save that, exit. And now I'm going to use that same $sign again, just to indicate that it's not, it needs to look for an object with this name within the experiment. And if it looks, it's going to find something called correct key, because the conditions file will load, and for every trial, this object correct key is going to have a value that's equal to the value in that row. So that should work beautifully. All right, so let's just click OK. And let's run and just make sure it's working. I'll just leave these blank. Oh, why don't I adjust the height of that first? Let's go to my instructions. So the height is way too big. So if 0.1 is that big, well, let's make it half as big as it was. So I'll make it 0.5. Let's have a look at and see how that looks. Well, that looks much better. I'll just leave it at that size. Okay, so press A for word, press L for non-word. Okay, press space. Let's do it. Oh, what's going on? Height is not defined. Oh, I think I was goofing around with something earlier. It's not there. Yeah. That's just something I was doing earlier. Please ignore that. All right, let's try this again. All right. I'm just going to press A for everything until I get an incorrect one. There we go. Okay. So I've just pressed A for every one of these trials. So if I go into my data folder, Which one? What time is it right now? It's 45. It's this one. So this was my most recent one here. And if I look across, so again, here I can see my correct key is there. If I go across to response, so if you remember from before, this keyboard element component is called response. So under this response tab, I now have this additional column. So this was the key that was pressed, so you can see I pressed A every time. And this was the response time, how many milliseconds it took me, or in this case it's by seconds. And this will indicate whether or not the response was correct or not. So in the case of these, which are all real words, the answer was correct. So it's given me this value of 1, and in the case of incorrect responses, it's given me this value 0. All right, so there we go. Now we're able to detect whether or not responses are correct or not. Great. Let's just close that, and I'm gonna delete these data files because I don't need them. Actually, maybe I'll keep just that last one. All right, awesome. Now what's next on our list? Oh yeah, adding the custom code component. So I was actually kind of debating on what we should do for this. I was going to do something that changed the height of the words, but I don't know if that really has any like theoretical relevance. So I thought, well, one thing that you want to make sure that your participants are not doing is kind of falling asleep. So one way to keep them a little bit more engaged, even though this is already a very dull routine, is to vary the length of the fixation time. And so I thought maybe we can just vary it between 2 or 3 different latencies. And but at the moment, there isn't a really easy way to do that. It's not built into the functionality of this program. We're going to have to assign a new duration for every repeat. One way we could do that is by including in the conditions file, we could have different fixation times for different stimuli. But I want to make sure this is perfectly counterbalanced, that every it's truly random. I don't want to have like this pseudo randomization where it's, you know, if we just have it between 1 second and 2 seconds, there's going to be some trials that always have 2 seconds or some trials that always have 1, and I want to avoid using multiple data file conditions files. So what I'm going to do is go into here. So first of all, this is the duration here, 1 second. Now I want to vary this, so I'm just going to add in, again, this variable duration. And again, I've had this, adding this little $ that says that this has a value somewhere in my experiment, so just go look for the thing called duration and make this equal to that. All right. Okay. Now this has no duration yet. All right, so I want to make this, I guess I could put it in here. I'll just put it in here. So I'm going to go down to custom here, and this is my code component. So I'm going to click add. So now this gives me all sorts of options. Now I can add custom code that is going to affect things that's going to run at the beginning of the experiment, or at the beginning of the routine, or each frame during this routine, or at the end of the routine, or at the end of the experiment. Now, I want to set the fixation time for this fixation point. So I don't want to do that at the beginning of the experiment, because then it will never change, right? I want to set it at the beginning of the routine. The beginning of the routine will be right here. So every time we go through the loop, it's going to set a new duration for my fixation point. Now, I don't know, maybe you never actually want to set, maybe you would never actually set a random time for your fixation point, but there's definitely things that you do want to randomize. That's why I chose this option. Okay, so for now, okay, let's just talk about this window for a second. This is the name of the code, and this is the code type. So for the on-computer version, we're going to be using PY, which stands for Python. If you're going to be running anything online, you need to make a JS, which stands for JavaScript code component. And if you're going to be running in both on the computer and the online version, then you're going to need both. So I'm going to start with just the Python version and make sure everything's working, and then we'll add the JavaScript version afterwards. Okay. Now, I want to make something random. So I want to set a random duration. So one thing I can do is, well, the one thing I have to do is I have to generate a random number that I can then use to kind of randomize this thing. So for Python, I'm just going to I'm going to import a package called random, and I'm going to then, well, what am I going to do? Well, I want to generate a random number. I'm going to use random .int, so that's going to generate a random integer between 0 and 1, basically. So this is excluding 2. So it's going to be basically this little function here will generate either a 1 or a 0 every time we run this. Let's actually let's kick to it's either going to generate a 0, a 1, or a 2. Great. So now what can I do with that? So every time I run through every time I run through this routine in the loop, it's going to generate a number. And I then want to use that number to set different durations for my fixation point. So I'll do that this way. I want to say if random num is, I need to have two equal signs here. This just means equal to, like I'm assigning a number. So here I'm assigning random number either 0, 1, or 2. I want to say, is it logically equal to? Like, is random number 1, 0, or 2? And so in this case, I'll just say if random num equals 0, then I want duration to be equal to, let's say, 1. Great. That reminds me, I should actually set duration equal to, let's say, 0 at the beginning of the experiment. Because it will need to have a value at some point. All right, so I'm going to say else if random num is equal to 1, then duration equals 1.5 seconds. And in any other case, which is basically only one case, where random num equals 2, then I want duration equal to 2 seconds. All right. So that's just gonna. So what this does is it basically generates a number that's either 0, 1, or 2, and then depending on what that number is, it's going to set duration equal to a different amount of time. Then I want this to be above this because I want to make sure that this happens before this happens, and then hopefully we'll get a fixation point that is either equal to 1 second, 1.5 seconds, or 2. So let's see if that worked. I'd be really surprised if it worked the first time. Whenever I'm coding, things never seem to work the first time. Okay, and of course it doesn't. So random has no, oh, of course. So random doesn't have an attribute int, it's supposed to be called randint. Let's try that again. Ooh, okay. I'm sensing that these are slightly different in length. Oh, that was definitely different. Oh, that was different again. Awesome. Okay, so it's working. Great. But if I go and look at my data file that I just made, 554, this one. So if I look at this data file, oh, this is the one that didn't work. So if I look at this data file, so I've got my response keys. I've got my whether it was correct or not. I was correct every time. Great. I've got all my trials. What I don't have here is any indication of how long that fixation point was. I actually don't know how long the fixation point was. And so if I actually want to use that, like let's say I'm curious to see if that fixation point has any effect on response time, I can't do that because I don't have any information about it. So I'm going to just show you another really useful custom code component, or like I guess just a line of code really. What I'm going to do, every time I'm setting this duration, I want to record what duration that is. So I want to write something like this. So I want to say, for this experiment, I want to add data, and I want to add data fixation time, or let's say fixation duration. I can probably make this snappy and short. It's called fixdir. And I'm going to indicate that it is 1. It's 1 second. And I can just quickly copy and paste this into each of these positions here. And I'm going to indicate 1.5 and 2. So now, every time I select a different duration, it should add a column into my data file, into the data file that this is outputting, that indicates how long the fixation duration was. All right, so if I just quickly do that again. All right. Oops. All right, that should be good enough. Let's just jump out of there. It should have created a data file for me somewhere around here. There it is. So now if I look in here, so actually I exited after it had set it. All right, so here I can see that now for each of these files I have this additional piece of information, right? I have like whether it's correct, what key I pressed, what the response time was, and also how long the fixation duration was. So if I wanted to say something like, well, when the fixation duration is longer, maybe they're paying more attention and answering faster or something. I don't know. I don't think this has any theoretical backing, but essentially what I am doing is saving this information into my data file. And you'll find that once you start adding custom elements into your experiments, that there's often times where you want to save something into the data file something that you added in your custom code that you want to save in the data file, and this is the way to do it. All right. So now we've got our first bit of custom code working, and it's working great, which is good news. So now I want to use this for an online experiment. But if I just tried to sync this experiment right now, it would have an issue, right? Because it would try and sync with this Python code and it wouldn't work. So, because all of the code that's happened, like the online version of this experiment is running using JavaScript code. I need to make the same version in JavaScript. Now there's an issue. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. I need to, what am I doing? Oh, yes. So there isn't an equivalent function in JavaScript as far as I know. What JavaScript does have is something called math.random. We use the same kind of thing. I'm going to say math.random, like that. Math.random just generates a number between a random number between 0 and 1. So it's a little bit different from the rand_int function in Python. And so I'll have to do this a little bit differently. So if I'm doing this, well, I'll do if a random num is equal to, let's say it's less than or equal to 0.333, I want duration to equal 1. So it's the same kind of thing. So I'm working with a number that's between 0 and 1. So if it's in like the bottom third, the duration will be 1. Else if random num is more than 0.333 and less than 0.666, then I want duration to be equal to 1.5. Ooh, I need to add little semicolons. And in any other case, I want duration to be equal to 2. So if this is more than this, or if it's less than or equal, if it's less than or equal to, I need to add a random num in here again. This looks good. Let's just space this out so it looks nice. And something I constantly forget to do is close my curly bracket. So you can just see here that the syntax for JavaScript is a little bit different. Like for my if statements, instead of using colon, I use like the thing that like the condition for the if statement in brackets, and then everything else in curly brackets, like the outcome. And I'm just linking these up between if and else if and if statements, or else statements. And again, for this, the way that I'm going to record the data is a little bit different. I need to call PsychoJS, call experiment, and within that I can add data. And I'm going to call it exactly the same thing, the same values. I'm just writing 1 here in brackets rather than just the letter 1, the number 1, because I just want it to be a string in the data file. I don't need it to be numeric. I'm not going to be doing any kind of math with it, so same thing. Oh, I can just. And for the last one, let's just save some time. Do this. Okay. Let's see. Well, let's see if this works. Oh, I almost forgot. Duration equals 0. Okay, so there we go. I've added the same custom code component into the JS version, and so I should be able to use that to run my experiment online. So let's try and sync with my project online and see what happens. Okay, so what I added varying fixation duration and correct response action. Let's just say that. So here, I'll call this third commit. All right, it's syncing. And it's done. Awesome. Let's try running it online. And see if it works. Let's just add my name. Ooh, seems like it's working. Okay, I'm just going to press exit, and that takes me out. It saves the data as much as I finished of the data. Close this. Go back into PsychoPy. And I'm going to sync again, and that should pull that new data file. There it is. So if I go back to my data file, you can see here, which one is it? 6 o'clock. That is the time. All right. So here we go. There we go. So you can see that I've got all of that information now. I've got my varying fixation durations here, and my response keys here, and this is there. Great. So since I actually didn't make a mistake like I was predicting I would, let's go back and intentionally add a mistake into my code and see if we can, and then I'll show you then how to find where that mistake is. Let's just say, let's just say I did this by accident. Let's do that, sync it. Say okay. Looks like that's all synced up. Now let's try running the experiment. All right, so we're on the loading screen, and we're going to get stuck on the loading screen. Yeah, you can see that. So this can be really confusing early on. It's really not apparent from everything that's going on this page anyway that something is fatally wrong with your experiment, right? So one thing you can do is go to your output in the coder window. And you can see here it's failed to parse the JS code. And so that's a first indication that there's something going wrong. Now the best way to do this is to right-click on the screen and go down to Inspect. This is why you should be using Chrome, because Chrome is great, and it allows you to inspect web pages. Actually, I don't even think I'm using Chrome right now, but this is definitely like a knockoff version of Chrome. All right, so I've got the only important thing to look at here. I wish I could explain everything that's going on here. I can't. So you can see up here that there's something going wrong. We have one error and one warning. And actually, if I go to console here, I can see exactly what's going wrong. And so what's saying here, it says uncaught syntax error. So it's just saying that I didn't write my code properly. And it's telling me exactly where the error is, right? So this is referencing the JS file, demo LDT, that's in the HTML folder that is in my repository on Pavlovia. And it's saying that there's an error in line 267. Okay. So what I do is go to my repository. I'm going to go to HTML. I'm going to go to demo LDT. And if I look over here, there's a counter that says exactly which line of code that I'm on. So I'm going to scroll all the way down. I think it was 267, right? 267. So I'm going to scroll down to line 267 right here. And this is where it's saying the error is. And that's exactly where the error was. That's exactly what I added in, or took out rather. So I removed a curly bracket here, and that's basically ruined all of the code. So you can really see that, like, tiny details are very important. But just because you've forgotten to put that one little curly bracket in, your entire experiment will not load. But now I know exactly what the error is. So I can then jump back into my custom code here in the begin routine, and I can add that curly bracket in and press OK. And I will then close these and add my fifth commit, resolve JS code error. And I can even add in line 267. and hopefully everything will run smoothly. And there it goes. Wonderful. All right. So that video got a lot longer than I thought, but I think we definitely covered some very useful ground. So we have added a way to detect correct answers. We added that custom code component that varied the fixation length, the fixation point length or duration at the beginning of each routine. And we also added in code that would kind of store that information in our data output file. We looked at how to find errors in Gitlab and resolve them, and we kind of went over a little bit about making commits. Yeah, all right. So that's that. So in future videos, I'll probably be going into more detailed custom code tutorials and maybe different types of experiments like maze tasks, typing tasks, things like that. All right, well, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Again, if you have any questions, my email is not on that page, but it's back on the first one. It's just at the bottom here. Feel free to contact me or leave a comment under the video, and I'll definitely get back to you. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you later.